Yo, 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 happy Sunday, Scaries. How's everyone doing tonight? How's your weekend been? Let me know in the chat. And yes, this is the correct stream. I think when I went to StreamYard, it didn't upload the thumbnail, so this is the stream that we're going to be on. So, hello, what's up, Lewis? Hello, animal liberationists. What have y'all been up to this weekend? Anyone doing activism? So, my weekend's been chill. I didn't do too much Friday or Saturday, just kind of working a little bit. And then today, I went to one of my friends. We had a little clothes swap where we trade clothes, and then any clothes that people don't take get taken to the thrift store. So it's a great way to get rid of some old clothes. So that was very exciting. And yeah, today on the stream, we're just going to be talking about building habits, how I've been able to use habits to change the trajectory of my life and other things like that. So happy Mother's Day, everyone. If you have a mother, I hope you did something nice for her. And if not, then I hope you're not sad today. And always remember to think of the animals whose families are torn apart by the meat and dairy industry. And that's who we are fighting for every single year. So, I want to start with a little campaign update for some of the stuff we've been working on with Pro Animal Future. It was a big week for me because it was my first time doing a media appearance. So, I was interviewed for PBS Iowa for their segment called Market to Market, which is mostly watched by small local farmers and ranchers. So, I don't know. Hopefully, they're not too pissed off by the idea of our campaigns. It does seem like the woman who was interviewing me, she does have a ranching background, but from what I've seen of that segment, it's pretty unbiased. So I'm hoping she doesn't label us as animal rights extremists or try to throw us under the bus or anything like that. But yeah, it was interesting. Luckily, it was on Zoom, so I didn't have to memorize a bunch of stuff. I could just kind of read off of the notes, and it wasn't live, which would have been a lot more stressful. But, I'm going to be doing a lot more media appearances in the future, probably. So it was a great practice. Croco Shark, you like the icon of the other stream. Interesting. So that's just like my banner for my YouTube channel. I don't know why it made it the thumbnail, but I guess it did. Are people in the other stream? I hope not. I hope they know that this is the right one to come to. But yeah, so that was an interesting week for me for sure. And yeah, we'll just be on here going through some habits. Let me know in the chat if you have any habits that you're trying to build or if you're struggling with it in any way. I do feel like I've built a pretty good knowledge base around this. So I'm happy to answer any questions. So yeah, let's kind of get right into it. I left you a message on the other stream. Oh, okay. Thank you for that, Croco Shark. I appreciate that. Can I wonder if I can delete that other one? I don't know how this works. Streaming is a little confusing. Nobody over there. Okay, good. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about my backstory. And last thing I want to say about the campaign is that we have a 50-50 shot of winning because our opposition did two polls and they found that one poll they won by 60%, and then the other poll they lost or we won by 60%. So that means it's like 50-50. So we have a really good shot at banning slaughter in Denver, which is super exciting. And if you do want to help us write postcards or put up flyers or anything, please feel free to donate to this stream, and all the money will go to Pro Animal Future and to our campaigns. All right, so now let's get into a bit about my background. I think if you see my life now, you may think like, oh, she's always kind of had stuff together. I've been able to put out a video a week on YouTube for 3 years, which a lot of people struggle to do. Not every week, but most weeks. And I've been able to become a full-time animal rights advocate, which is amazing. There are so many people who want to do that. And it's kind of hard. You really do have to work hard and get there. And this is not something I would have been able to do 5 years ago, even. It was only because I built the skills of small habits that have allowed me to be able to build up work ethic and whatnot. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I think work ethic is an underrated skill. And I think that it's something that we really need as vegans, because if we're trying to change the trajectory of history and the course of the world and change culture, we have to be very strategic about it and we have to work really hard. So I'm hoping to give you guys this habit knowledge. Hopefully, you can use it in your life and become more effective advocates. So, right now, I am 34, it's 2024. We can start when I started building habits, it was probably around 2017, 2018, and my life looked completely different back then. But I guess we can actually start in college. And yeah, I think that people don't fully understand how much of a degenerate that I was in my past. Like in college, I basically just started drinking a ton, partying a lot, went really hard. I ended up getting a DUI. I was hospitalized for drinking at one point, and it was not a good future. Like, if you talk to someone who knew me in college, they would probably think I'm like a raging alcoholic now. And I'm not, luckily, but I almost became one. So college was, I had a blast, it was a lot of fun. But yeah, definitely not building good habits or taking my career seriously or even thinking I should learn anything really. So I graduated and then I moved to New Orleans and I became a tour guide. And the tour guide lifestyle is very drinking heavy. Yes, Lewis, I was hospitalized. I'm fine now, but yeah, it was quite dangerous. So New Orleans has a very heavy drinking culture. I moved here, became a tour guide, and you don't have to start working till like 8 p.m. when you're a tour guide, maybe 6 p.m. So you work from like 6 to 10 p.m. Then you've got a bunch of cash and your friends are going to bars and you're like, oh, I guess I'll just go to the bar. And that's what I did most nights. And I would look around and I would see people who were 10, 15 years ahead of me, and they just seemed kind of wasted away. Like they hadn't really achieved their dreams. They were still going to bars and hanging out in the French Quarter and being a tour guide, which is like a pretty good job, but it wasn't something I was super passionate about. But the normalization of drinking in New Orleans is pretty crazy. I was walking my dog this morning around 11 a.m. and there's a park near my house and there was a huge kickball league and there were a bunch of different teams playing kickball and I saw people pouring vodka into each other's mouths like 11 a.m. It's crazy, and that stuff is just completely normalized here. Lewis, you're a reckless drinker too. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to end up hospitalized if you drink a shit ton when you're a 19-year-old woman, right? Like it was tough, but I'm glad I got out of that. So no serious complications from it, just a bad night in the hospital. And yeah, so the normalization of drinking in New Orleans, the other thing that's very normal here is to not really have a strong sense of purpose or a strong sense of where you want your life to go. So I think in other cities, if you're in the service industry, people kind of look down on you, which I don't think is good at all. I don't think we should look down on people in the service industry. But in New Orleans, it's just such a normal thing. Like most people are in the service industry. I think it's around 40% of our economy. And because of that, it almost feels like people don't have that drive to get into a better line of work. And once again, I'm not saying anything bad about the service industry. I enjoyed my time there, but I do think it's important for me and for some people to have bigger goals to look toward. So, I was when I was 27 or 26, I got a job at Jimmy John's, which is a terrible sandwich chain here in the US, but their whole thing is freaky fast delivery. So I spent my days just delivering sandwiches, and then I would get off work, I'd go to the grocery store, I'd buy a six pack, and then I'd come home and drink with my buddies or maybe go to bars and just kind of screw around on Reddit. And I was really aimless, and yeah, it wasn't a good path for me. I was gaining a little weight and I just didn't feel totally fulfilled. But luckily, this book, Atomic Habits, came out. Well, really, two things happened. The first was that I met my husband, and I was like, I need to clean up for this guy. Like he seems like he's worth cleaning up for. And the other thing was this book, Atomic Habits, came out. And once I read that, I understood so much more about habit change and I started implementing some of the techniques. So I started juggling, I started doing yoga, I started applying to better jobs. I ended up getting a better job that was actually really terrible, but it was better than working at Jimmy John's. I worked out, I joined a gym, I trained to hike the Appalachian Trail. We only spent about 3 weeks on the trail, but still the fact that I was able to physically do that, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't had this book. And then as I went vegan and I saw just how terrible what was happening to the animals was, I knew that I needed to do something about it. And because I had built that background of small habits and getting better at things and maintaining and building consistency over time, I was able to, when I said I was going to do street outreach, I actually did it. And when I did it, I edited the videos and I was able to put out consistent content on YouTube, which is so important. I think that a lot of people want to do street outreach and they feel like it's something that they should do. But when it comes down to the day that they're actually going to go, there are a lot of excuses, or maybe they don't have everything quite ready. And it's just easy to get out of the habit of it. So, really important stuff that I don't think I'd be where I am today, anywhere close to where I am today, without building good habits. Ray C visited Unity Diner last Friday for the first time. Oh, that's awesome. I would love to go to London and go there. It looks really good. Not something to indulge every day. Yeah, for sure. Vegan 10 years in October. That's awesome. Thanks to Gary Yourofsky. Great. Whenever I meet someone who's been who went vegan around like 2014, I know it was because of Gary Yourofsky, because of that speech. And yeah, that's so cool. I'm so glad that worked on you. I wonder if I would have gone vegan after seeing that speech. I was already vegan when I saw it. I don't know. I know I've told this story before on stream, but I think it's really interesting is that I was actually just with my friend and she went to high school in Florida, and Gary Yourofsky actually came and spoke at her high school, and she said that it was awful and everyone just made fun of him and ate even more meat, and she still eats a ton of meat and is very closed off to veganism, which is a total bummer, but it's still cool that she got to see Gary Yourofsky in person. But yeah, so now let's talk about how I did build habits and how you can build habits. So, if you guys haven't heard of this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, it is amazing. Let me know into the chat if you've read it before. It's a book that I've given to a few people and told them to read, and it seems like no one really actually reads it. So that's why I want to cover it in the stream and some of the big takeaways and the lessons there, so that if you don't want to read it, you don't have to, because I thought it was really interesting, but maybe it's actually boring just based on the fact that so many people don't actually read it. But the first thing we want to talk about are the laws of habit change. And there are 4 laws of habit change. We'll just go through them one by one. So the first is that you want to make your habit obvious. So I guess I'll use the example of juggling for me, because when I was thinking, oh, I want to stop drinking every night, I'll still drink, but maybe not do it every night. I needed something to do instead, because you can't just stop doing a behavior unless you have something else to do instead. So I said, okay, I'll stop drinking and I'll start juggling. So let's say you want to stop drinking and start juggling. What do? You need to make the juggling obvious. So usually when I would come home from work, I would just kind of screw around, maybe lay around on my bed, browse Reddit, eventually go to a bar. But I started leaving my juggling balls on my bed just so that they were like always out. So that way I couldn't just get into bed unless I moved the juggling balls. And when you see them there, you're a lot more likely to actually pick them up and start juggling. And juggling is a great habit for quitting drinking, because it's actually really hard to juggle when you're drunk. There are a lot of hobbies you can do while drinking, and juggling is definitely not one of them. So you got to make it obvious. So a lot of people want to start exercising. A great way to make that obvious would be to lay out your clothes the night before, or your shoes the night before, or just you could set an alarm on your phone. There's a lot of things you can do. You can even put up a sign. I'm thinking about putting up a sign that just says like destroy the meat industry, and putting it by my desk or something, just so I know that that's like always my goal when I'm working. I'm thinking like, how can I destroy the meat industry? Because that's really what I want to do. So that's the first law, is the cue, to make it obvious. The second law Craving. So when we actually think about actions we're going to take, we have the cue or like the first thought about them. And then the craving is the release of dopamine. And that's what's going to make you actually do it. So if you're hungry and you see food, then the craving would be like, oh, you want to eat that food, right? So you want to create some sort of a craving for the habits that you're trying to build. So for me, the craving was that I really love kombucha. I actually don't really drink kombucha much anymore, but I used to drink it all the time. And so I said, when I juggle, I will drink kombucha. And then that made me kind of have the craving for kombucha and made it more likely for me to juggle. Croco Shark, how would one make, say, teeth brushing obvious, assuming you don't leave your toothbrush on the toilet? You could leave your toothbrush on the toilet. Yeah, I mean, man, do you not brush your teeth every day? That's like something we learned. I remember in elementary school, we would have to say if we brushed our teeth that day, we'd have to put like a check mark if we had. So that's a good cue. So yeah, I would say leave the toothbrush on the sink where maybe you wash your hands, or you could even put post-it notes like brush your teeth. What time do you get up? You know, if you have an alarm set an alarm 5 minutes after your alarm to wake up that says brush your teeth. Or if you are doing it at night, flossing was another thing that was really hard for me. But once I started flossing, it felt like if you don't floss, your teeth start to feel really dirty. So, yeah, I think with brushing your teeth, leave your toothbrush on the sink, create an alarm. Um, yeah, brushing your teeth is really important. I highly encourage everyone to build that habit as well as flossing. Flossing is arguably even more important. So definitely get some floss as well. Floss is tough because if you don't floss a lot and then you try to start flossing, your gums are going to bleed and it like really sucks. So yeah, definitely make sure you're doing it a little bit. Does anybody else juggle? Animal Liberationist says, I can do the basic juggle with any similarly weighted items, but I was never able to learn 4+ items. Yeah, so 4 ball. If you're juggling 4 things, it's actually 2 in 1 hand. So if you learn to do 2 in 1 hand, then you'll be able to do 4. So I would start with 2 in 1 hand and then do 4. What did you do for flossing? How did I start flossing? That's actually interesting because it was so long ago that I started flossing. I would think I was around like 24. So this is over a decade ago. And I don't remember how I started. I think I just bought some floss that I liked. Um, and yeah, left it by the sink and just added it to my nighttime routine. I also think nighttime routines are like really underrated. And one thing I found is that it's really easy to get so tired that you don't want to do your nighttime routine so that you don't go to bed on time and then you put off going to bed because you actually just don't want to brush your teeth or wash your face. So what I like to do is brush my teeth, wash my face way before I'm tired, and then it makes it so much easier to just get into bed when you need to get into bed. So I would say for flossing, try to do it on the earlier side. You could even leave your floss in your living room. So when you're watching TV, you can just floss. It doesn't really matter when you do it. It just matters that you do it. Yeah, so I would recommend getting some floss and just leaving it around. Racy, I generally brush my teeth every 2 days for about 6 minutes. Wow, the dentist said that you were in excellent condition. That's interesting. I would guess that you should brush your teeth more than once every 2 days, but if it's working for you, then it's working for you. Vegan Gays, what's up? It's the first time to see you in my live stream. How are you doing tonight, Vegan Gays? The stream queen, but I'm coming for you now. New studies say floss before brushing, according to Dr. Greger. Well, if Dr. Greger said it, then it must be right. That's good. I was wondering about that. I floss before brushing anyway. All right, back to our laws of habit change. Where was I? I was on the second law, craving, make it attractive. How can you make flossing attractive? I think that flossing becomes attractive because your teeth just feel a lot better afterwards. So like as you learn to do it more. Okay, the third law, this is the one that I feel like has had the most impact that I've used to the highest impact. And the third law is to make it easy. Because a lot of times when people start new habits, they try to take on too much. Like my coworker was talking about how she wanted to join a gym and get up at 5 every day and go to the gym every single day. And she ended up going like maybe once or twice. And that's hard because you're trying to do two habits at one time. You have the getting up early and the going to the gym. And it's a lot better if you first establish that you get up early and don't go to the gym during that time, or you build a separate habit of going to the gym. Warrior Vegan, big fan. Natalie, coming to Cali soon. I don't have any plans to come to California, but I do like it there. It's a nice spot. I'm actually going to the AVA conference next week, and there's going to be a ton of cool people there. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, I don't know if you're going to be there, but if you are, then definitely hit me up. So back to making things easy. So for juggling, I wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm gonna juggle for an hour or juggle for 30 minutes." I'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna juggle for 5 minutes." Set a timer for 5 minutes, and then at the end of the 5 minutes, you can either keep juggling or you can stop. But 9 times out of 10, you're just gonna keep going, but because by the time you've already started, then you're in motion, and an object in motion stays in motion. Vegan gaze, a good ship is to just go to the gym even if you go for 2 minutes just because you showed up. Yes, I actually was just about to bring that one up because I've been able to go to the gym consistently 3 times a week for like the last, what, 4 or 5 years or so. And I have a rule that if I don't feel like going to the gym, I just have to walk there. It's like a 5-minute walk from my house. And then I can leave if I decide to. I've only left after doing that like twice in like 4 or 5 years. I once I'm there, I'm pretty much always do some sort of workout. That being said, if you're really not feeling it on some days, that's totally fine. The important thing is to stay consistent, not to be perfect every single time. If you try to be perfect every single time, you will then it becomes a lot harder to stick to the habit of going because you know that every time you go, it's going to be really hard. So there are a lot of days where I'm just not really feeling like working out and I still go, but maybe my workout scaled back a bit, like hip thrusts or Bulgarian split squats are really hard. There are a lot of days where I just don't have the willpower to do those exercises, but I can do a different exercise that's easier and that I like better instead. And I think that's the way to build consistency over time is to make things easier for yourself. Sometimes when I don't feel like editing at all, which is quite a lot of the time, a lot of times the thing that I really don't want to do is just like plug in my external hard drive and open up the project. And once I do that, the editing kind of takes care of itself. Or with yoga, which I've been really bad about doing lately, if because I have to move a table and then put out the mat, but if I move the table and put out the mat, then it's so much easier to do yoga. So the actual habit you would want to build there isn't doing yoga, it's completing your yoga setup. And then the yoga will happen naturally after that. So make it easy is crucial. I think that's the thing that trips people up the most because it sounds really counterintuitive because you wouldn't think that someone would just go to the gym and leave and then that person's going to be in good shape. And yes, if you did that every time you went to the gym, you definitely wouldn't be in good shape. But by showing up and building the habit, then you're a lot more likely to actually do the workouts once you go to the gym, and then you will eventually be in good shape. Leah Wilborn, what's up? During pandemic, I had to start working out at home with YouTube videos. Now going to the gym seems like more time consuming. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more time consuming than working out at home. But home workouts are hard for me. I have a really hard time doing them because like the trigger for me is going to the gym. So if I don't have that trigger, then it's a lot harder to like do the workout. David's vegan. Natalie, thank you for all you do. I really appreciate your rational and logical approach and everything you do. Especially love your Elwood's dog meat content. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you enjoy my rational, logical approach. I try to do that, but the other thing is that humans are such emotional creatures. We think that we're rational and we think we're logical, but we're actually not. We're completely emotion based. So one thing I always try to do when I'm talking to people is get a read on their emotions. Are they upset? Are they angry? Are they ashamed? How are they feeling? And then try to make them feel safe and safe enough to change their mind, because that's what we want to do. We want to change everyone's minds on animal rights to make people realize that animals should have rights. And in order for that to happen, I think people need to feel safe. But that is a debate I am willing to have. because I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. All right, so we got the rules of the habit change. The first law, cue, make it obvious. Second law, make it attractive. Third law, make it easy. Fourth law, make it satisfying. This is one that I actually struggle with a bit more. I don't know how satisfying my habits are. I guess they're satisfying because I keep doing them. But there are some days where like I really don't want to go to the gym. And then on those days, there's actually a shop called the Herb right near my gym, and they've got like a coffee shop in there, and they also have like other fun drinks like mushroom energy drinks. They're not like psychedelic mushrooms or anything, but I wish that would be really cool. But they're just like nice. So on the days I really don't feel like going to the gym, I will tell myself, you get to go to the Herb afterward, and then I'll do that. So that's an easy way to make it satisfying. As far as juggling goes, to build up the habit to make that satisfying, is like you really do get a solid hit of dopamine when you learn a new trick. And, our brains are wired for learning and discovering things. So there's a lot of inherent curiosity when you're building habits. And I think with a lot of habits, the satisfaction is in the doing itself, especially with animal rights. I mean, if you go to a fur protest, most protests you go to, people are going to go out to eat afterward. And that's so satisfying to be surrounded by friends that you were just yelling at people with for 2 hours, and you're having delicious food and you're talking about animal rights, and it feels really good. So I think that anytime you're doing activism, try to make it a bit satisfying at the end. I get this when I put a video on Instagram, and then I get dopamine hits when people like it and stuff. So that definitely incentivizes me to keep editing and stuff like that. And all right, now I want to talk about breaking bad habits, because sometimes we don't even need to build new habits. Sometimes our habits are good. It's just the bad ones that are preventing us from living up to our potential. So essentially, with breaking a bad habits, you just invert everything from the creating a good habits. So the first law, which is to make it obvious, if you were trying to break a bad habit, you would make it invisible. So for drinking, I used to go to the grocery store and buy beer, and then it would be in my fridge. So when I wanted to cut back on drinking, I just didn't go to the grocery store and buy beer. So then you don't have beer and then you can't drink, right? It sounds like so simple, but that's actually the best way to break bad habits. So the second law is the craving. You can make it unattractive. So whatever you're trying to break, how can you make that unattractive? Once again, with drinking, it kind of makes it unattractive on its own when you wake up and you feel like shit the next day. But honestly, I still, even with all that, I still had a hard time not drinking until I got this Whoop watch. And it's crazy because it shows you charts of your sleep and your stress levels when you're asleep. And when I don't drink, which, I've probably only drank a few times since having this watch, my sleep is fine. My stress levels are low. And then even if I have one drink, the stress levels are way up. And if I have a few drinks, they're like crazy high up. So just seeing that chart of your stress levels during sleep makes you want to drink way, way less. It's crazy how well that works. And that's not just me, that's other people who have Whoop are like, oh, I actually didn't even intend to stop drinking. But once I saw those charts and saw how it impacted my resting heart rate, I just naturally stopped. The inversion of the third law is to make it easy. So the inversion would be to make it difficult. So how can you make your bad habits difficult? And this is something I did. In addition to drinking too much, I had a time period where I took way too many edibles, like weed edibles. And I actually, it was like if I had them around, I just ended up taking them every night. So I bought a lockbox, and it's a time-based lockbox. So you can put stuff in there, and then you set how many hours or days you want to lock it for. Then you push this button, and then, yeah, everything's just locked in there. It's so crazy. So you can put edibles in and be like, oh, I don't want to eat these till the weekend. You can lock it for 5 days, and you literally like can't get to your bad habits. I did this too with my phone. I just got this thing called a brick, and it's like a magnet on your fridge. And when you tap your phone to it, it disables all your social media sites and any time wasting sites that you want. And in order to re-enable them, you have to get up and you go back over there and tap the brick again. That has been so useful for me, especially because since I started managing social media for Pro Animal Future, it's like I take it a lot more seriously, which means I'm always checking Instagram and responding to people and like trying to find inspiration. And it has a way of kind of taking over my nights. So now I brick my phone, and then I can still use my phone for calls and texts and actual important stuff, calculators, but I can't go on social media. So that has been super useful. I highly recommend, if you struggle with social media, check out Brick. It's only available for Apple, but it's really been useful so far. A friendo, what's up, dude? How you doing? Louis says, that's exactly what got me to stop drinking. I felt so sick one day after drinking way too much that I associate the smell of alcohol with that horrible feeling. Yeah, but the problem is, like, when I do that, that disgust only lasts for a few days, right? And then I'm like, oh, I already want to drink again. But I haven't drank in a while. I am going to drink this next week, though, because it's the AVA conference. And like, fucking everyone is going to be there. Is anyone in the chat going to be there? There's going to be like, Earthling Ed, David Rams, Humane Hancock, like all these people that I want to meet. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I've heard it's kind of like party vibes there. So yeah, that could be very cool. All right. Anything else on habit change? So we went through all the laws. Um, yeah, the other thing to do is just kind of join communities where the behavior that you're trying to implement is rewarded, which with animal rights stuff, if you live in a city with other activists, that's the most important thing to do is join, because it normalizes the idea of doing stuff for animals, and then you just do it naturally. And if you don't do it, people kind of like look down on you. They're like, oh, you didn't do any activism this week, like why not? And you kind of want to rise up to the occasion. So when I see people out doing fur protests and foie gras stuff, I know that, like, oh, I need to call this restaurant now because all my friends are out there doing this, and like I want to support them. So I think joining those kinds of communities is really important. Another example of this for me would be joining Toastmasters, which is like a public speaking club, and it meets every week. And it's cool to be around people who care not just about getting better at public speaking, but care about personal growth in general, because my friends don't necessarily care about that as much. So if I talk about habit change or nonfiction books I'm reading, they're not going to care. But people in Toastmasters are all about that stuff. They're all about like self improvement and like moving up in your career and whatnot. So I think joining that community has been super beneficial for me. All right. Does anyone have questions about habit change? Otherwise, we're probably going to move on to some reactions. Sam asks, Natalie, do you know any what? I might. Animal Rights Joe, what was your experience like on edibles? Edibles are so weird because they all affect me so differently. Like some I'll be really chill and fine, and then some I'll get really anxious, and sometimes they just make me like so tired, but then I can't sleep. So yeah, I think edibles are very different based on kind of the strain you're using. In general, I don't want to encourage people to use marijuana because I feel like the science is still conflicted. Some people say it's not that bad, but others say it is really bad, and it's hard to know. So it's better to just you know, treat it like alcohol, because a lot of people say it's way better than alcohol, and it very well may be, because alcohol is very bad, but it doesn't mean we should be doing it all the time. I heard another vegan YouTuber encouraging people to smoke and just saying like, "Oh, if you're anxious on marijuana, that means you're actually anxious all the time and the marijuana is revealing it and you need to look deeper into yourself." And I just don't think that's true. I think that weed can cause anxiety, and for me personally, I'm not usually anxious, but when I take weed, sometimes I am. So, yeah, just think we should all be responsible and safe. Croco Shark, are you just ignoring my question because you're tired of the topic of toothbrushing? What was your question? When I do brush, I sing a 3-minute song in my head. Do you use a timer? Okay, now I see your question. Sorry I missed it. I actually have an electric toothbrush that automatically goes for 2 minutes. So I don't have to sing a song in my head because my toothbrush does all the work. It's a Sonic Hair. I love it. Highly recommend. Natalie, do you know any foreign languages? Also, how old are you? Foreign languages are so hard for me, man. I wish I did. I wish I could be one of those people like, "Oh, I know Spanish and I know French." And no, I don't know any foreign languages. It's a problem with Americans. I think most people who grow up in other countries know more than one language, but I certainly do not. I would love to learn one, but also whenever I try to learn a foreign language, I really hate the process of doing it. So, no, I do not know any foreign languages. And I am almost as old as you've been vegan. I'm 34 years old, so you've been vegan for 35 plus years. That's awesome. That's crazy. Let us know how you feel. Are you completely deteriorated yet? Um, yeah, so I'm turning 35 in November, which is kind of crazy. It seems really old to me. Maybe it's not that old, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, I want to react to a couple Reddit this one Reddit story, this story I found on Reddit, it's not a Reddit story, is, like, so sad, and I just wanna talk about it. Wonder, can I make this bigger full screen layout? No, then where do I go? Sorry, guys. Okay, so yeah, this story is so sad. So, this Washington family was devastated after butchers mistakenly killed their pet pigs. This happened in Washington state, which when I first read this, I just assumed it happened in England. I don't know why. But yeah, it's just terrible. There was a mobile butcher who went into their home or went outside their home and shot their pet pigs. And I guess they got the GPS wrong and they like didn't try to contact them or something. They just went in and they shot the pigs. And I just think this is so messed up. And then they return and their pets were in the process of being butchered. Like, can you imagine coming home to your companion animal literally being chopped up? Like, if someone did that to my dog, I think I would actually, I might kill them there. I wouldn't kill them, but my husband probably would because that's absolutely insane. They were found laying in pools of blood. Oh my god, and then the butcher asked if they wanted them to be processed. How disrespectful is that? Like, if you went and you shot someone's dog and then you said, "Oh, do you want me to process them?" Like, "No, I don't want you to process them. They're part of the family." And this, to me, just reveals how fucked up our society's treatment of animals is. And obviously, we all know that, right? Like, we know that what's happening to animals is terrible and messed up, but it's one of those things where the farmed animals are like so separate from even companion farm animals that we kind of forget about it. Like, it's almost like they're in their own world. But then when the worlds cross, when the butchers break into people's homes or kill their pets, it's really just awful. So, yeah, I thought that was super fucked up, and I just wanted to touch on it. And yeah, it's a tough world that we live in. What we want is to create a culture where all animals' lives are valued, where people can safely have pet pigs and not have to worry about someone just rolling up and shooting their pigs. It's just completely terrible. Also, I didn't really know much about mobile slaughter. Like, I knew they existed, but I guess they were created in 2002. And yeah, I don't know. It's definitely like, um, it's if I were an animal, I would much rather have someone shoot me at my home than have to go to a slaughterhouse. Obviously, neither are good, but yeah, it all sucks. What day in November do you turn 35? My birthday is November 16th. I am a Scorpio. Yeah. Ian, I've realized how limited the representation of vegan farmers is. I'm trying to find ways to share positive solutions to farming that have a vegan philosophy at heart. Definitely check out Rancher Advocacy Program and Transfarmation. I know that they have a lot of vegan farmers, so that could be a good thing. All right, now I want to react to this video that I saw part of. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. I just thought that this was funny. We have something called cannabinoid receptors in our bodies. I think the terpenes in each type of cannabis react differently for different people, or we work better with certain different ones. Yeah, that's definitely true. Everything affects people differently, and every strain seems to affect people differently. When I was a teenager, my sister smoked a lot of weed. She loved it. And I don't want to say she forced me to smoke with her, but I definitely like didn't really want to and felt pretty pressured to. So I did smoke with her a couple times, and I would always just get like super anxious, or I wouldn't feel it. And yeah, everyone's different, so it's important to be careful when it comes to drugs and alcohol. So some people might get anxious because they aren't smoking the right stuff. There might only be one terpene that works for them. That's interesting. So it doesn't have to do with like it's not true that weed just reveals anxiety that's always there. It actually does cause anxiety. I think that Sam, you can pass for a teenager. Nice, Mr. Brian Johnson over here. Yeah, vegans, I think definitely look younger, but I don't know. People are always saying Dr. Greger and Neil Barnard look like shit, but I don't think they do. I think they look pretty good. It's probably just bias against vegans. All right, let's watch this video. So this is the militant vegan meeting Ed Winters and debating traitorous language. So I'm not really sure. Is traitorous a word? I guess it is. Let's check this out.
From Germany and Austria, where I do German activism, and I've been watching your videos for a couple of years. And I've been on your Discord. I've been a Patreon supporter. He's filming, if that's okay for you. So I just wanted to thank you for your work and keep on going. And it's nice to meet you in person.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I do have some critique points too, but that's
All right. So she's like, "Hey, I love you so much, and now I'm gonna criticize you." It's interesting that she's a patron of Ed's. I'm also a patron of Ed's, which I pretty much have been since I went vegan. We stop aging when we go vegan. I don't know if that's true, but it is interesting. I have one of those scales that like tells your metabolic age, and mine is 31, which is how old I was when I went vegan. So maybe you do stop aging when you go vegan.
normal. And I just wanted to ask you what you think of this, for example, when we phrase things like slavery and rape, because I've seen you use a little bit softer words sometimes.
If you know a family member or a friend or a colleague, someone who's doing veganuary, then hopefully this book is the perfect gift that you can give them to help them this veganuary and to give them the drive and passion and enthusiasm to, of course, remain vegan once January comes to an end.
And I just wanted to ask if you will stick to that in the future.
Probably.
Okay.
I think it's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
I feel like that example she provided is kind of didn't really have anything to do with how Ed usually talks. He was just kind of talking about veganuary. Is she saying that he should have said, give this book to your family so they stop being slaveholders and supporting the Holocaust or something like that? You were born exactly 1 week after the Berlin Wall fell. I went vegan on February 9th, 1989. Oh, that's cool. So you went vegan before I was born. Yeah, I didn't realize I was so close to the Berlin. Maybe I did know that. I don't really know that much about history. Vampires are actually vegans. They are, because they only drink human blood, and humans kill a lot of animals. So we should definitely kill the humans.
I think the messaging and vocabulary you use is always going to get through to people in different ways. I think that for a lot of people, those like very strong words are going to have a positive impact, but I don't think for everyone they will. And I think sometimes language can be one of the most important things that we can use in bringing someone on board. And sometimes I found in the past I began arguing with people over language rather than the message itself.
Yes.
And in that situation,
Yeah, that definitely happens sometimes. Like when you're talking to people, and in the past when I have brought up slavery, I mean, sometimes it's been fine, like kind of in the way that Justin of Debug Your Brain does, which I think is really useful and a good way to do it. But people are going to try to grab onto anything they can to disagree with you and to try to devalue your message. And if you are using strong language, sometimes they will get caught up in the words you're using as opposed to the message you're actually saying. It's a way to deflect. And it's honestly, you know, kind of on us, right? If that happens, because we're just like giving something they can easily use to weasel around our arguments.
I thought, well, maybe if I use different language, I could still make the point, but I'd have a more fruitful discussion. So I think it really depends. I think there are different environments, and in some environments, yes, those types of words can be very powerful and very thought-provoking. And then in other ones, I think they can be very divisive. And I think a lot of the work that I do, more often than not, those words will be more divisive than helpful. So it really depends on the situation and context, I think.
I do
Yeah, that's true, because Ed does a lot of stuff where he's just talking to a classroom or kind of debating people at tables, whereas Raphael is more out in the streets, kind of trying to get attention and trying to be provocative in order to get more eyes on her, which is different from the advocacy Ed's doing. He's kind of already in the position where he has a lot of attention on him, which means he doesn't necessarily need to use these words as much to grab that attention. Animal liberationists, do you still find time for your cunting hobby, Nat? Yes, I love cunting, and my neighborhood right now is perfect. Anyone who doesn't know, cunting is cat hunting. My neighborhood is perfect for it now because there are just so many cats just waiting for me to eat them.
understand the sentence where you say I've had situations where I've been talking more about the words itself, but in effect, when you talk about the words we use to describe what's happening to the animals, you are actually talking about their value in our system. So that's why I'm so adamant about using the words that we would use in human slavery situations.
Ignoranz.
I kind of disagree with her there, because I feel like sometimes when you do bring up those words, then you do lose sight of the animals. At least that happens with me. It's almost as if people kind of forget that you're talking about animals and instead just start talking about slavery or the Holocaust. But it's not something I do super often. Leah, in outreach, I say forcibly impregnate. What's the other word for that? I do say murder, though, also cunting. Yeah, and I mean, with the R word especially, that's such a big trigger word for people. I feel a bit weird about saying it. That is what's going on, right, to these animals. But I think forcibly impregnate is fine there. And I think you could use the R word too, just as long as the other person knows that you aren't like calling them a rapist, because if they think that you are doing that, then they're not going to take you seriously. They're going to feel really offended. So in situations like this, and in most situations in life, context is everything. Crocodile Shark, I disagree that slavery is a good word for animal agriculture, as I associate slavery with forced labor, whereas animals are imprisoned and killed. That's a good point, because there are some animals that are used for forced labor, like horses or ox back in the day. So in that case, slavery may be more apt. When I talk about slavery and animal agriculture, the main point that I'm usually trying to get across is that culture is wrong about a lot of things. There was a time when it was cultural for everyone to have slaves, and that was just considered completely normal. And right now, it's cultural for everyone to eat the mutilated bodies of animals and not think it's a problem at all. So typically, when I talk about slavery, I'm talking about it in a cultural context, not necessarily what the word itself means. But yeah. I don't say cunting and outreach, was laughing at your use of it. Yeah, I actually don't talk about cunting nearly as much as I used to. I think I've become a bit more serious as an outreacher. Like, it's if you're on the streets in New Orleans talking to drunk people, you can say whatever you want. You can just kind of have fun and say cunting. But if you're talking to students on university campuses, you kind of feel a bit more serious about it.
Sklaverei, Mord und Gewalt.
And that's what I try to also share with other vegans, because when people critique me for using these words, you can turn this whole situation, ask them why you shouldn't.
Right.
And I think that's exactly the core message that we're trying to spread. And that's the way of breaking speciesism through things. Because actually, I've been watching your videos since 5 years, and I wasn't vegan when I watched your videos. And I'm not saying that it's your fault, because obviously it's my fault. When I read the word vegan, I should go.
Imagine if she was like, I wasn't vegan because of you, Earthling Ed, because you were doing something wrong. So she hasn't been vegan that long then, if it's only been less than 5 years. That's interesting. She's done so much in that time, which is pretty amazing.
Vegan and stuff, but I'm now trying to be the kind of vegan that I would have had to have 10 years ago. Someone where I see a video where they use these words and I'm like, what the fuck are you saying? But it doesn't mean that you didn't impact me. Of course you did.
I think if I'd heard someone 10 years ago saying that animal agriculture is slavery or a Holocaust, I don't think it would have really affected me. I really don't think there's anything someone could have said to me back then that would have made me gone vegan or even consider going vegan. And that's unfortunate. There's some people that are just completely unreachable. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is something someone could have said, but it definitely wouldn't have been Holocaust or slavery. I could have just easily written that person off or even been like, oh, yeah, maybe it is a Holocaust. Like, whatever. I don't care. I just wouldn't have cared. Right. And that's the issue, is that so many people just don't care. I remember this would have been actually, this is when I was reading Atomic Habits, which was in 2018. And there's like it's an example of a habit, the habit of going vegan. And it kind of goes through like, how would you build the habit of going vegan? And it says, oh, you start with cutting out red meat, and then you cut out all meat, and then you cut out seafood, and then you cut out eggs and dairy or something. And I remember reading that and just thinking, oh, well, I'm so glad that I'm never going to build that habit, and I don't care. I'm never going to go vegan. And that was, not that long ago. So I think when we think about what would have affected us 10 years ago, it's really hard for us to know because there could have just been absolutely nothing. Racy, in my activism, I feel that discussing health and environmental benefits with people can become a distraction. Shane needs to come from the heart. And for me, that means ethics. I do agree with that. I think if they bring up health or the environment, you can touch on it a little bit, but make it clear that we're talking about the animals, because the people who go plant-based for health or the environment, they're way more likely to cheat. They're way more likely to start eating animals again. But once people really connect with the ethics, then, you know, they're less likely to go ex-vegan. The environment especially is like, it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm doing my best for the environment. I'll just have this burger one time and not even think about the animals at all. But I do think health is important to touch on in outreach. If people are saying that they don't think it's healthy to be a vegan, we do really need to counter those claims. And that sometimes people are just never going to agree with you on that. They're just completely deluded, or maybe they've seen TikTok videos of carnivore influencers, and it's really hard to get them to agree that you can be healthy as a vegan. Those people are probably just not worth talking to. But never bring up health unprompted, because this is what Pax Fun is research shows, is that people are so into personal choice and freedom, and health is like a big trigger for that personal choice response. So it's something you don't ever want to bring up unless they bring it up and you need to address it. Natalie, my first step in going vegan was to stop eating humans. Cannibalism was so hard to break. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's step one, right? We're all eating humans. Did you guys see that Ricky Gervais clip where someone was asking him about like if he would eat Paul McCartney? That was really weird. I don't know why they kept asking him to eat people.
No,
I'm not trying to put you down at all.
I wouldn't mind if it wasn't your personal, your personal preference, the way that I do things. So yeah, I think as you say, there are certain times where those words can help us bring value to animals, and that's a very insightful way of looking at it.
It was exactly the word Holocaust that turned me vegan.
Man, Ed is so nice to people. Like, I hope I get to meet him next week because he'll be at the conference. But yeah, he just seems like he has like such a good heart. Like she's not coming at him in like a mean way or anything. But I could see some other activists that I can think of who, if anyone gives them any feedback or criticism, they would react very negatively to. So I'm glad that he's taken this feedback nicely. And yeah, that's very cool. Natalie, how do you feel about inflicting violence? I feel badly about it. I think we should avoid inflicting violence when we can. However, sometimes violence is necessary. Like if someone goes to your yard and shoots your pigs, I think you could probably use violence there. I actually think they're going to go the legal route and lawyer up, which is probably better. But yeah, I would just be so freaking mad.
Yeah, because someone went through the roof when I said it's just so many, it's like the Holocaust, and they were like, you can't compare the animals with the Holocaust. I was like, why not? And for me, that's why I try to say that a lot. But thank you anyways. And
I wonder if people who live in Germany have a stronger reaction to the Holocaust comparisons. I would assume they do have a stronger reaction, and that because she is in Germany, she's been able to be more effective than if she were talking about the Holocaust in the US or even Australia, because I know Tash Peterson talks about it a lot, and it seems like she gets a lot of backlash. Whereas Rafaela, I don't know how much backlash she gets. I feel like it's less than Tash, but I think something about her being German makes that comparison for her more powerful and kind of wakes German people up a little bit more because from my understanding of their culture, they do feel very bad about the Holocaust. Like they talk about it a good amount and they want to atone for it. It's not like, slavery in US history that we just kind of pretend to ignore and we're like, oh, not really, whatever, slavery happened. It's done. It's not our fault. We don't really have that sense of like atonement that I think Germans have about the Holocaust, probably because that was a lot more recent than slavery was. But, civil rights and stuff was around the same time as the Holocaust too. So, yeah, it's interesting. I also think it's easier to be vegan in Germany. I've heard they have all vegan grocery stores. Maybe there are a couple of those in the US, but exceedingly rare. Yeah, slavery could be a bit too abstract to people. It could be. It could be. Ed is like a spiritual master. He's so eloquent and the words just flow. He really is eloquent, and that's something I've been trying to get better at. I'm trying to work on improving my vocabulary, but man, no, Ed's just so he speaks so well. It's crazy.
Maybe that shifts something in me and in you, and that we have to be more effective together as vegans.
Well, I mean, and I think you're right about effective things. It's always a learning process, and I don't think there's ever a situation where the answer will be the answer in every situation. Because as we talk about nuance, we talk about complexity of different people and the way we speak to different people, and so effective communication and effective advocacy is a learning process, isn't it?
Definitely.
There's always going to be situations that we can improve, we can do things differently, and it's all about learning from experience and learning from what research tells us. And all these
I think research actually tells us that if we use more radical language,
Hier, nimm den panierten Leichnam eines versklavten, vergewaltigten, ermordeten Tiers.
that people cannot evade anymore. They are more provoked.
I am going to question this. Rafaela, can you send me that research? Because I would assume it's the opposite. I could be wrong. I'm totally happy to be wrong on that. But yeah, I want to see that research for sure because that video she just posted seemed really unhinged. And, I like unhinged people and things, but I feel like it would be really easy for people to just write off if you're talking about that. What if you were at a demo and a counter protester were to physically threaten you? Would you have any problem breaking the mind body connection? I'm not sure what you mean by the mind body connection. I would not do anything violent in that situation because, I mean, yeah, you just want to de escalate at that point. De escalation is really important. Like in New Orleans, when some dude punched me, right? Like I didn't punch back. I just got the hell out of there for my safety. And I think that we have to prioritize our safety because there aren't that many people fighting for animals. So we want to make sure that we live a long time. So don't do anything violent at a demo. We want to come away looking like the better people. And if you fall down to someone's level, then they can use that against you and against the animals. And that's the last thing that we want.
However, more stays because it's not a euphemism. They are cottoned, sugar cottoned in euphemisms all day long. And I think it's our moral obligation as vegan activists to not use traitorous language.
To break the facade.
Yes, to break speciesism through the word.
That's definitely true. The meat industry hates the word slaughter. They never say slaughter. They say process or harvest. And it's absolutely ridiculous because process is like such a mild word. Like you can have, a sales process or a habits process. But when you're literally chopping animals to pieces, don't call that a process. That is slaughter. It's murder. And yeah, they try to water down things all the time. And it is really annoying. So I definitely agree with her on that. We need to make sure that we're not using at least the meat industry's language. We shouldn't say artificial insemination. We should say forcible impregnation, things like that. That's so funny that they hate the word slaughter, like they're called slaughterhouses. The meat industry actually doesn't call them slaughterhouses. They call them processing plants or harvesting plants, which, is really stupid.
Words we use.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you too. And I will be making more English content. So, of course, I will be tagging you. I'm the militant vegan.
Oh, well, it certainly seems.
Yeah.
When I was starting my channel, I actually thought about calling myself the militant vegan. I was also thinking about being the preachy vegan. luckily I decided against it because I think she's a much better militant vegan than I could ever be.
But I try to actually be nice. But people say everything that we say with the truth is militant, so we have to take that back.
Well, yeah, this is the thing: is the word militant is a weaponized word, and even if you use the softest language, people will still call you militant.
That's the truth, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, whenever our opposition for our campaigns in Pro Animal Future, whenever they put anything out about us, they call us animal rights extremists or militant animal rights extremists. And there's absolutely nothing extreme about protecting animals. I think it's a lot more extreme to kill 1,500 baby lambs every single day when they're 6 months old. But apparently, we're the militant ones.
Tried the soft road. I really did. But at the end of the day, as soon as you want more from
I can't imagine her trying to do the softer thing. That's interesting that she tried it. I'm glad that she found her method.
people than just eating organic or stuff, they will call you militant. So why not use the terms anyways? Because
so embrace it.
I guess even you people call militant sometimes, right? So it obviously doesn't matter. You might as well use the hammer.
Well, yes, yeah, exactly. I think context and situations depend. Will be somewhat dependent, but yes.
One more thing that I wanted to thank you for: 5 years ago, I was a doctor and I was really unhappy with the health system and everything, and I knew that I wanted to have my life about veganism and animal.
I can't believe she was a doctor. That's crazy. I've heard that being a doctor in other countries is way worse than being a doctor in the US. It sucks here, but they make a shit ton of money. Whereas in other countries, it really sucks and they also don't make very much money. Of course, that's because our healthcare system is completely controlled by pharmaceutical companies and actually really terrible. And people end up paying like thousands of dollars for basic stuff. So it's actually quite a big mess, but it's still better to be a doctor here.
Rights as soon as I turned vegan a few years later, and your Patreon, the community in the Discord server, and the information that I got, I'm now a full-time vegan rights, animal rights activist. So that's something that you showed me that it's possible, and that's wonderful. Thank you.
Did it.
Yeah, I did it.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Oh, he's so sweet. He's like, "Oh, you did it." Yeah, that's definitely how I felt as soon as I went vegan. I wanted to become a full-time animal rights advocate, and I didn't think it was possible because of Ed. I actually one of my friends her job is an animal rights advocate with like an organization. So I guess I always kind of knew it was possible, but I definitely didn't think I'd be able to do it, at least not as quickly as it happened. So yeah, I'm just so grateful to be a full-time animal rights advocate. So I definitely feel where she's coming from here. It feels really good.
And I'm socially awkward right now because I'm so flabbergasted. I'm sorry. No, I know.
I feel like she was not being socially awkward until she said that, and then that made it awkward.
I hate it too. People do that to me, and I hate it. But it just feels like some dreams are coming true, and that's nice. And I hope that the animal rights dream comes true too. That's
you and I both. Yeah, terrific. And what was your name?
Rafaela. Thank you so much.
I'm sure I'll see your work.
Yes, I hope so. If you don't, then I did something wrong. They will say Earthling Ed is much nicer than you, and I will say, well, I hope you go vegan. That's it. Go vegan.
Well, whatever works for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Well, nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Have a nice vegan evening. That's what I always say.
Oh, that was really cute. That was really heartwarming. Yeah, I really liked that. I've definitely had people come up to me and be kind of awkward, but it doesn't bother me because it doesn't happen very often at all. And generally, when I meet people who like my stuff, they're actually really cool. We end up getting along pretty well because they already know me and know they like me. That means that we probably kind of vibe a little bit. So if you ever see me in the wild, come say hi. If you're socially awkward, that's fine. I'm also socially awkward and pretty good at dealing with socially awkward people. So yeah, that was really cute. I like that. Man, we have a lot more people in the stream now. I was actually thinking about leaving, but maybe we will keep things going. There's another video I wanted to watch. It's the new Mike the Vegan video. So maybe, have you guys seen this yet? Do you want to watch it? Let's see. Hi, everyone. Noob Dog back once again. Glad I caught your live stream this week. Thank you for being here. I'm glad that you caught it as well. I'm not going to have a stream next week because I'll be at the AVA conference. So this is the last one for 2 weeks, but 2 weeks will be on. All right, let's watch this Mike the Vegan video about red meat causing cancer. I like Mike's videos, but sometimes they're like kind of hard for me to understand. So I'm hoping watching this as a group will make it easier.
Body's own cellular rejuvenation system to treat the.
All right, we're gonna let that ad play. Natalie, I went up to you. I remember you. I remember that. And then yeah, I would have been happy to chat longer, but it was great to meet you. That was a really fun March. Oh shit.
To Dr. Peter Attia's video on whether or not red meat causes cancer. As many of you know, there's processed meat as a class 1A carcinogen according to the WHO, and then class 2A for red meat. And Dr. Peter Attia, I said PETA, but it reminds me of Family Guy.
That's a great idea, Brian. Maybe you could join PETA.
Join me for what?
No, PETA, the organization. PETA is an acronym, PETA.
No, I'm not. I'm Catholic.
And Dr. Peter Attia, super well-selling, best-selling author for his Outlive book on longevity. Many of you have asked me to comment about him. I've almost commented about him in the past, especially because he sort of puts exercise way ahead of dietary changes and even says that he wants to stay out of the sort of tribal dietary stuff. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is the interview that many of you have asked me to respond to. I don't know who this.
I don't even think I've heard of Dr. Peter Attia. I've seen that he's been going on a couple big podcasts. So yeah, I'm curious to see. Mike is one of the best, but he doesn't like oils, and I haven't made my mind up about that. I am so confused about oils because, yeah, people are like, oh, oils are bad, but apparently olive oil is really good for your lifespan, at least according to Brian Johnson. It seems like he, has done a lot of research, but then I saw Dr. Matthew Nagra also say that olive oil was really good. So I had stopped using oil and now I started using it again. It's really confusing. Leah, oh, you remember me. I do remember you. You were embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. I definitely remember you. So at ALC, that was the first conference I've gone to that's like an animal rights conference. And there were a few people who came up to me that were like way more awkward than you. Like someone saw me and they were like, oh my God. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. So yeah, it was a little jarring the first time it happened that someone recognized me, but it's something that you kind of get used to pretty quickly. And it's not a big deal at all.
This guy is asking him questions, but this is going to be one of my classic V actions. I'm just going to do a raw reaction and then of course add stuff that needs to be added later. So a mix of, and also I got a new microphone. Hopefully it sounds good. I even like taped my little logo on there. So let's see how that goes.
And so if you had to look at that statement, say just red meat gives you cancer, where would you rank that in our ranking system today?
So this is going to sound bold, but I would actually put this in the nonsense category.
Okay, right off the bat, he's putting this in the nonsense category. So the WHO's like team of scientists that reviewed all the studies on the topic. They're just wrong. Peter Attia's right. Let's see what his argument is.
Which is not to say that a dietary pattern high in red meat could not play a role in the development of cancer. But that.
Okay, so that sounds like it does cause cancer then?
That's very different than the question. So if the question is, does red meat cause cancer? I think that is not correct. And I think there's plenty of evidence that that is not correct. If the question is, do people...
Okay, distinction that needs to be made. He's saying there's plenty of evidence that that's not correct. It is worth mentioning. There is a high level of evidence that needs to be presented to prove that something is causal. And that's why they left it at probable carcinogen. Some other things in that category are like hydrazine, lead, DDT, and some other things that, might need a little bit more data. But it's also the case that you need just as strong of evidence to say that something does not cause something as you do to say that it does cause it. So my guess is he's not going to present all of that in this, sort of off the cuff interview, but let's see.
People who eat a lot of red meat, or do people who eat a lot of processed red meat have a higher risk of getting cancer? I think the answer to that question is yes, but it's probably less because of the meat, although in the case of certain processing, it may be the case, but it's probably much more because of what they're not eating. It's probably...
I started reading Sacred Cow, which is this terrible book and it's very anti-vegan. And basically, when they have a chapter on whether or not meat causes cancer, and they blame all of the evidence of meat causing cancer on what they call like lifestyle effects. So they say, oh, the only reason vegetarians, vegans have lower rates of cancer is because they're likely to be more healthy, they exercise more. And we actually don't know because it's all epidemiological and you can't trust that. So I'm expecting that's the direction that he is going here.
Probably much more because their diets tend to be much lower in vegetables. And
at least he likes vegetables still. That's why I actually haven't responded to him as soon as I should have, because there's so many like carnivore crazy people out there that just need to be responded to first. But I was like, I might as well.
Specifically much lower in insoluble fiber, which plays a very important role in the prevention of colorectal cancer. So,
but why does it? And this is where, yeah, you could argue we have studies showing that chlorophyll might offset the negative effects of heme iron. However, that's sort of like saying, you know, just because chlorophyll might offset some of the carcinogenic nature of smoking, just antioxidants in your bloodstream, for example, therefore smoking doesn't cause cancer. Obviously, that's a more extreme example, but I don't see how his logic of this dietary pattern where like there's probably this carcinogen here, but you know, if you eat enough vegetables, you're okay. Although I guess he's saying, you know, it's actually the positive effect of these other foods. Well, then I would ask him, why is red meat sticking out of the pack here? And
you know what's interesting is I just watched this documentary called Merchants of Doubt, and it talks about the tobacco industry and how they were aware that cigarettes were causing cancer in like the 1950s, but they continued to deny it until essentially the 1990s by saying, oh, well, we don't know for sure that it causes cancer, even though they pretty much did. And it does seem like one of the people that they had working for them, he's on Fox News a lot. Stephen Millet, I think is his name. He's also done some work for factory farming industries. So the meat industry is literally getting the same people that were doing this with tobacco. And I think that's why we see so much misinformation surrounding this topic.
Perhaps this is a good time to hit this quite recent 2023 study. I have not mentioned this study yet, but it's a massive, interesting one. And it mentions the WHO's status of probable, and that as the motivation for actually doing this research, saying, yeah, they asked for more data. Let's get more data. They say, yeah, in the past, we've had studies that are like 100,000 people, and then they got up to 500,000 people, then to millions. And in this study, looking at 150 countries, they're more or less covering billions. And the result is that unprocessed red meat consumption is quite highly correlated with overall all cancers. And they did a bunch of interesting things here. That correlation was up around an R of 0.8, which is highly correlated. But we can look at this chart here, and it is the case that, you know, a correlation value over 0.5, in my opinion, very notable, the higher up.
So the question the Sacred Cow people would have is like, is this not just other factors in the country besides red meat? Does the study control for that? I assume that it does. I'm like pretty bad at reading studies and understanding this. So yeah, hopefully he'll explain
more
it.
Concerning. And yeah, 11 cancers were over that threshold. We have skin and multiple myelomas heavily correlated at the top and being actually marked as previously unexplored for that connection. Then we have leukemia as well as breast and prostate cancer actually beating out colorectal cancer, followed by testicular lymphoma and other concerning cancers as well. They also noted something really interesting that they say contributes to the causality. They say that there seems to be a pretty distinct, roughly 18-year lag between increases or decreases in red meat consumption and then the corresponding increase or decrease in colorectal cancer. This is across several countries, and they say that this is a strong reason to support causality here. But let's let them get back into it.
You know, the debate on red meat and cancer goes back for long periods of time. And again, it suffers from all of the usual trappings of nutritional epidemiology, which is why
Knew it. He was going to bring up epidemiology.
John Ioannidis famously said that all nutritional epidemiology belongs in the wastebasket.
Yeah, we're just going to throw out all nutritional epidemiology. In fact, let's just go straight back to anecdotes. I think that would be great.
Sacred Cow is hilarious, particularly when they talk about ethics. I have not made it to the ethics section yet. I am guessing that they're just going to say that, you know, if you only eat cow, you'll kill 1 cow per year, but if you eat a vegan diet, you're going to kill hundreds of millions of animals, which is absolutely not true at all. But I am guessing that that's what the ethics section is about. I'll be honest, I haven't been able to get myself to read it in the last week. I've been reading other books because Sacred Cow is just so bad, but I really do want to finish it. So I will do that soon.
The two most obvious problems with nutritional epidemiology in this regard are that it's very difficult to get an accurate reflection of what people consume using food frequency questionnaires. It's almost impossible.
Questionnaire. I know he knows what a questionnaire is, but it makes me think of like a musketeer that's asking you questions.
We are the 3 questionnaires. Fill out this form or sword play.
But yeah, we have meta-analyses like these showing food frequency questionnaires are reliable, especially under 1 year. And at this point, I should mention that this video is sponsored by Seeds DS01, other ones because it has that.
Seriously, it's very difficult to disentangle the variable of interest from the other lifestyle variables.
Are you going to do a reaction video to Sacred Cow? I am definitely going to do some sort of content surrounding Sacred Cow. I don't know if it'll be to the book or to the documentary, which I haven't watched yet. I'm working on a larger video about regenerative farming. So that's how I even started reading Sacred Cow. So yeah, there's definitely going to be something about that. I was actually trying to find a solid debunk of it that debunked like all the studies in the book, because there's a lot of them. And I know they can't be completely right, but I guess there's been one of those in the works for a couple of years. I think it's going to be a big project. I would love for that to exist. So I'm not going to do like a full debunk, but I will create some sort of content surrounding it for sure.
That are covariates within the problem, what we refer to as the healthy user bias. So I don't dispute for one moment that every time you do an epidemiologic survey and you compare people who live on hot dogs and pepperoni to vegetarians, the epidemiology will always tell you that the vegetarians are going to live longer.
And is he going to say that's because they're vegetarian? Well, he did support vegetable and fiber consumption earlier.
And while that might be an extreme example, you do appreciate that on average, those vegetarians have a much higher socioeconomic status. They are much more health conscious. They are exercising much more. They are much less likely to be.
Vegans are poorer. I'm not sure about vegetarians, but yeah, absolutely not true at all. Vegan diets are 30% cheaper. Meat consumption goes up with GDP reliably. So he is absolutely wrong here. I knew he was going to bring up the healthy user bias. And that's why that Netflix twin study is so great, because they got rid of this critique. Natalie, have you seen Sky's debate with Vegan Gains? He did great. I watched part of it. I honestly couldn't watch too much of it because it was really stressful for me. I actually am quite scared of Vegan Gains, and I don't really like watching dudes argue very much. I feel like they're just trying to I don't know. I'm sure Sky did great, but yeah, I had a hard time watching it. Where's the documentary? I don't know. I think you might have to actually buy the documentary, which, I don't want to give them my money, but it's somewhere on the internet.
Smoking, doing yoga, all these other things, and they're.
Yeah, this is what has been brought up a lot. Yeah, that healthy user bias. Again, it's probably like the 5th time I've heard it, and it can be used to essentially just dismiss anything in which we're getting a positive result for a food or a practice. And this is a good opportunity to plug Dr. Matthew Nagra, who also responded to him.
We still see associations between unprocessed red meat consumption and colorectal cancer. And in some studies like the UK Biobank, those who eat more red meat are actually of higher socioeconomic status, yet still have higher risk.
And going back to that study, actually, from this.
Red meat is so expensive. Of course, people are of a higher socioeconomic status if they're eating a lot of red meat.
This chart here on the left, of course, we just have that cancer rate and red meat consumption. But then on the right, you can see the bigger circles means higher socioeconomic status. And yeah, as we've known, red meat is associated with an increased higher socioeconomic status because it's an expensive food. In developing nations, it's considered a luxury, etc. And so I don't know where he's going with that. Yeah, it probably is the case that there are certain habits that people that are vegan or vegetarian have that are better. But we adjust for that. And in many times I've explained that we over adjust for that crap. For example, taking things that are causally linked to the diet, like BMI being lower because of higher fiber and higher water consumption in food, leading to lower caloric intake. We have randomized trials showing it lowers BMI, yet we end up adjusting for that and lessening the effect, which is really frustrating. So, this can go either way here, but he's acting like, oh, red meat.
I'm not sure I totally understood that. He's saying that basically they adjust for having the lower BMI, but if they didn't do that, then vegans would come out even further ahead, I think. Animal Rights Joe says anti-vegans always complain about vegan propaganda and then quote sacred cow, LOL. You're absolutely right. It was wild reading this book because the sentences that she's using, I can see directly where anti-vegans got these arguments in the first place. So I do recommend reading it to people just so you kind of have a background of where they're getting this information. But yeah, she says nutrient dense like all the time. Is this where nutrient density, that made up claim, came from? It's pretty wild. Yeah, they quote sacred cow. I think at this point they don't even know they're quoting sacred cow. They're just using the common anti-vegan talking points that happen to have come from sacred cow.
Is just fine. In the case of red meat, it's only confounding factors. It's only other things and habits that could also be skewing the results, which is frustrating. And where I have to just straight up call him out for one of the things that I know about him and his habits, that multiple sources show that he's eating between 6 and 10 processed deer jerky sticks per day, which a quick calculation shows is like 3,000 milligrams of sodium per day. And
that's so gross. Can you imagine eating those every day? Ew.
And of course, this is a processed meat. So he's arguing here for red meat not causing cancer. Well, he's slamming down a processed meat, and he'd probably be like, oh, well, it's a healthier processed meat, natural flavors, blurty blur. It's still a processed meat. It still falls into that category. And it is also worth mentioning that he is an investor in that venison company. So he also has not just the motivation to eat those and talk about eating those, but also to talk about how meat is healthier for you than it might actually be. And one Reddit,
I guarantee all those venison places probably come from those breeding facilities that they create. So when you talk to hunters about why they hunt, they say, oh, you have to keep the population lower. But they're actually these facilities. There's a bunch of them in Michigan and the Midwest where they breed deer into existence. I'm betting that a lot of the venison on the market comes from places like that. So it's absolutely ridiculous that they both pretend that hunting is necessary to keep population down, but also are breeding animals in existence to profit off of them. And I get ads for this, whatever company he's talking about. I get ads for that like all the time. So they must put a lot of money into advertising.
Editor mentioned that he's eating like $900 a month worth of this deer venison, which is wild. But yeah, veganism is expensive though. And I should also mention, as far as that sodium goes, he talks about the dangers of sodium even on his website, high sodium intake and inflammation and kidney risk and the actual danger of it during aging. Because remember, this is a longevity guy. He's trying to get you to age as gracefully as possible and live long and stuff. But he even talks about the risks of sodium. And of course, to the American Heart Association, I might as well just double down on it. Quote, the science behind sodium reduction is clear. Significant evidence links excess sodium intake with high blood pressure, increased risk of heart attack, stroke, and heart failure. And to Business Insider,
it's really hard to limit sodium. Sodium's just in like freaking everything. And yeah, 2,300 a day. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not very much at all. So I watched this video by the vegan gym, and he was trying to follow Dr. Greger's protocol, and the sodium number was like crazy low, and he couldn't eat like tofu or soy milk. Like I eat that stuff all the time. I'm sure my sodium intake is way higher than it should be.
one of the articles that covered this, they're saying he's trying to get a high protein intake to keep his muscle mass on because that's associated with healthier aging. So he's slamming down like 100 grams of protein from these processed meat sticks, which, again, actually class 1A carcinogen in order to live longer. So I don't know how his logic around diet works out. It's really strange. And I think that he has some weird bro sciencey dietary takes, but he kind of takes this angle of being agnostic or neutral on diet and then pushing exercise, which I think is really marketable, and clearly it's marketable because it's gotten him to the top of the charts on his book. And final point here, I would say, though, I am a big proponent of keeping muscle on through aging, and I am going to do a video on that in a vegan context as well. So stay tuned for that. Let's get back to what he's saying, though.
Muscle is one of the things you really lose as you age, and it's also just so important to keep it on. But you have to eat even more protein as you get older because it's harder for your body to absorb it and use it efficiently. But then the other thing that's hard about aging is that your metabolism slows down even more. So that means you can't eat as many calories as you want without gaining weight. So now you've got to eat more protein, lower calorie, and that's just really hard to do sometimes. Leah, yep, hear you. Debate bros get tiring and VG is scary sometimes, but it was satisfying to see Sky get under his skin by not taking his shit and not getting too riled up. Yeah, whenever you're dealing with someone who's trying to bug you, the most satisfying thing you can do is just not let it happen. One of my favorite lines, or one of my favorite quotes, I think it comes from Marcus Aurelius, is the best revenge is to not be like that. And that's something I try to remember when I'm doing outreach and someone's being an asshole. The best thing I can do is just not let it get to me. And I'm not perfect. There are times where I do let it get to me, but I think it's good to keep up with that. Ethan Bishop, what's up, guys? What's up with you, man? Are you still getting out there doing animal rights stuff? I haven't seen too much of your stuff lately. Animal Rights Joe, I like debate bros when they make anti-vegans look stupid. Infighting isn't productive. Fiji and Sky did exchange compliments at the end of the debate, though, so it wasn't that toxic. That's great. I'm glad it wasn't toxic. And yeah, that's actually something, it's called the narcissism of small differences, which means that the more similar a group is, the more they fixate on their differences and use those differences to tear each other apart. And I think it's such a bummer because there's so much infighting in the vegan community. And I think that's true with all communities. But I think that if we keep our eyes on the prize, we keep our eyes on animal liberation, we can let the little things slide a bit more and just focus on working together. That being said, if you're doing streams every night, you got to create some drama in the stream. So I see why Vegan Gains wants to debate with other vegan YouTubers, even if he agrees with them on some stuff. People don't want to just watch people agreeing with each other. They want to see a little drama. So yeah, Ethan, I've been making animal rights politics videos lately, but have been on a hiatus since my 21st birthday for obvious reasons. What, have you been getting really drunk every night? Is that what's going on? Because I was actually just talking earlier in the stream about how much of a degenerate I was when I was your age and how I turned my life around. So make sure to watch that if you want to build better habits.
So when you look at the most compelling case for people who eat the highest amount of meat and their risk of cancer, there was a study that was done in Europe that looked at nearly 500,000 people, and it divided them into a cohort that were eating more than 160 grams per day of protein from red meat and processed meat, and it compared them
That is a lot of meat. That's an insane amount of meat.
to people that were eating virtually none, 20 grams per day. So again, I like when they do this because you're at least taking like the most extremes. And indeed, there was a difference, but it was relatively small, right? So even under that setting, it was the difference between a 1.7 increase in the risk of cancer versus a 1.3 percent risk, absolute risk for colorectal cancer over the period of study. So
still a 40% increase of getting one of our leading killing cancers, still notable. And I had to find the study. Here it is. He seems to even be defending processed meats here, but the conclusion is literally in this population, a reduction of processed meat consumption to less than 20 grams a day would prevent more than 3% of all deaths. That's the study he used to support his claim. It's not
3% doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about like hundreds of thousands of people, then it becomes a lot.
Just epidemiological studies that we have creating a connection here. There's a reason that we got red meat into the causal category for WHO, and that is because we have studies on the mechanisms. We have things in there such as heme iron, which oxidizes from this study, that oxidative stress involved in lipid peroxidization or fat oxidization, a complex process which finally causes the formation of cytotoxic and genotoxic aldehydes. And these aldehydes are able to promote.
Does anyone else just like not understand when he gets all scientific and talks about like heme iron? I'm really confused about heme iron. Like, I guess it's bad, but then some meat eaters say you need it and that you like can only absorb it. It's really confusing. Some guy says the Stoic philosophers were awesome. I agree. Stoicism is a good philosophy. I think a lot of people are confused about it. They think it means like totally unemotional and unfeeling, but really Stoicism is about focusing on what you can control. And that's why I love the idea of animal rights advocates focusing less on turning other people vegan and more on what can we do to create big legislative change for animals. Ethan, yeah, I'm a degenerate. Thanks, Natalie. Oh, that's awesome. I am glad. I love a good vegan degen, as I call them. Nikki, thoughts on the vegan gains and Sky debate? We were just talking about it. I didn't really watch it. Are you gonna react to the vegan gains in Sky Chat? I wasn't planning on it. Yeah, probably not. I think it would raise my blood pressure.
Promote cancer progression as reported by epidemiological and experimental studies. Oh, experimental studies. Oh, we have those. I forgot. And then we also have NEU5GC, which I would say needs more research, but it's at least another reason, for example, from Science Daily, leads to an inflammatory immune response that could increase tumor formation. And it's at the point where scientists are experimenting with ways to lower NEU5GC in the case of this one by electrically shocking it, pointing to red meat-induced colorectal cancer possibly being NEU5GC induced, and then also that the human intake of NEU5GC can cause these antibodies in the body that change the intestinal flora, thus promoting chronic inflammation and tumors.
And again, that's assuming that you arrived at this through randomization, which you didn't. So again, there was another step.
And that's where, yeah, it'd be nice to have randomized control trials for everything, but we can't randomize control trial massive populations of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So we do the best that we can and have this thing called epidemiology, which I don't know why certain people are just like, oh, let's poo-poo on that and throw it all away, unless it's some category that we like.
The reason people do that is because Joe Rogan did that, and people listen to Joe Rogan and what he says. As soon as he's like, oh, epidemiology is bad, then that just gets in the cultural lexicon, and that's what people think. Rat, how to deal with doubts. Can you be more specific on what doubts are? I think some doubts are very justified. If you don't know how to do a backflip and then you try to do a backflip, you could end up hurting yourself. So I think the best way to deal with doubts is to take action and do the things that you're doubtful of for yourself. So if I feel like, oh, maybe I don't know how to do street outreach, then I would start doing a lot of street outreach and learn what works. So the cure for doubt, I believe, is action. Ethan Bishop, what is your experience with romantic relationships with other vegans? I am married to a vegan. So my husband, we weren't married at the time when I went vegan, but I went vegan and he did about a month after me. I just asked him to watch Dominion quite a few times. And one day I woke up and he said he'd watched it and he was done with meat and thought it was horrible. And now he's super passionate about animal rights. So yeah, dating vegans is great. It's so nice, especially when we're traveling with the family who's not vegan or friends who aren't vegan. Just having someone there who understands it and knows what you're going through is so valuable. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't gone vegan, but I'm so glad that he really connected with the animals. So yeah, Ethan, love what you said about legislative change. By the way, that's why I'm making videos about politics on top of animal rights. That's awesome. Good. And if you're not familiar with Pro Animal Future, check it out because that's what we are doing. Pretty based husband. My husband is based. He is very, very cool. Reminds me of a line, confidence follows action. It doesn't precede it. That's 100% true. You can try to like fake it till you make it and try to be confident about something. But if you're confident about something that you've never done, then that's just kind of stupid. You should try to do it first and then confidence comes after that. So I am not confident about like reading studies and all this type of research, but Mike the vegan is. So that's why I kind of listen to him. Where is your husband? Never seen him. Yeah, we actually are not trying to be public about our relationship because he has a YouTube channel as well and we don't want to be like a like an influencer couple or anything. And yeah, we just kind of want to keep our private lives private as long as we can.
Like exercise.
Study that was done, it was a 10-year observational study that looked at about 150,000 people with the highest tertile of red meat consumption. And, they had a 50% increase in absolute risk, in relative risk to those in the lowest tertile. Again,
yeah, you're still just proving the point that the epidemiology is matching the mechanisms.
I could, the error bar on this study was so big that it barely made statistical significance despite the sample size there, which I think, again, just speaks to the heterogeneity.
Barely making statistical significance. If something makes statistical significance, it's statistically significant. It means it's very unlikely that the finding is due to chance. Yeah, we could always do better, which, again, look at the p-values in the study I showed you earlier.
Sprinkle, $10. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm actually going to do something in response to that. Be right back. So I was trying to juggle, but I forgot there's actually like a light up here. So it's kind of a bad place to juggle, but let me get my balls so I can do that. Thank you so much for the donation, and all donations will be celebrated by juggling. All right. That's a good point too. If you're waiting to be confident before doing something, you're waiting to be stupid. Yeah. Yeah, that's true, because there are so many things in life that you have to like, you don't actually need that much confidence to do a lot of the things you want to do. Like, especially with going to the gym, people are like, "Oh, I feel really insecure about going to the gym because like I don't know how to lift weights." But how are you going to learn to lift weights if you never go to the gym? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think with a lot of things, people get the order wrong. What you should do is take the action first, and then the confidence will come. Please don't tell me what to ask yourself. Yeah, right. Oh my God. Yeah, that would probably, I think our differences on name the trait would drive us apart in that situation. Mobius, it's difficult having a non-vegan partner. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it would be tough. Good luck. Just make sure that it's worth it for you and that it's something you can get past. And honestly, if you are dating a non-vegan, they're probably going to consume so many fewer animal products just by virtue of dating you than they would if they were dating someone else who ate meat. So it's still a net win for the animals. Like, it's harder for you, but you're probably helping the animals. Brent, what's up, Natalie? Hey, dude, good to see you in here. Thanks for streaming in. Dating a non-vegan, especially when you share children, that yeah, I see so many posts on Reddit that are just about conflicts with that. I think that I would be very careful before. Oh wait, you already have children? Well, yeah, let me know some of the things you're struggling with. Nug Dog, if it's the burger dude, I'm jealous. So he's not a vegan YouTuber. He YouTubes about something completely different. I hope it's not lifting vegan. It's not lifting vegan law. Yeah, he's not a vegan YouTuber. So you guys are never going to guess, and that is fine.
Freaking 0.000. So he's just, being ridiculous. And this is where, again, it's statistics where if you look around and actually look at the rates per 100,000 of cancers, it will look pretty low, but we're still talking about our leading cancers. And this was, again, that whole relative risk versus absolute risk thing that all these meat proponents came out in support of processed meat, saying it's not actually that big of a deal that processed meat causes cancer because it's not going to automatically kill you. And yeah, well, only 15% of people that smoke cigarettes are going to die from lung cancer. So that's not a reason to smoke. And this is just bad public health logic.
Is it really that low? Because I mean, I guess 15% is quite a lot, especially when you extrapolate like millions of people. But I would have guessed that more people died of lung cancer from smoking. Pretty soon, I don't know what, but something's, sorry, I can't say your whole name. I'm thinking of doing vegan street outreach. I watched your how-to video. I got a small mic, iPhone, and tripod. How do I approach people though? Just go up to them. You are in luck because I actually wrote an ebook on this topic. Let me drop the link in here. It's called the Vegan Outreach Starter Guide. And just go to that website, Natalie. Oh, wait, I put it in wrong. It's nataliefulton.substack.com. And then you enter your email address. You don't have to pay any money. It's totally free. And then it will mail you the audio version and the book version of the Vegan Outreach Starter Guide. And there's a bunch of sign templates or the sign ideas in there. And it tells you exactly how to approach people. So definitely check that out. Yo, Natalie, what are your thoughts on antinatalism? I am not going to have a kid. I do not want to. So those are my thoughts. Nuke Dog, catch you later. Yeah, hope to see you in 2 weeks on Sunday.
If I do say so.
Of this, net, I would say that every one of these studies basically ends up having the same issue with it, which is when you look at the details, you realize it is very difficult to come up with a meaningful view that it's red meat specifically that is driving cancer, as opposed to the absence of vegetables, the absence of fiber, or maybe the
And again, going back to that study I mentioned, we're seeing other foods not being associated here. Even, I'll say it, even chicken not being associated. Yet people eating.
The other thing that's interesting is like every calorie replaces something else. So every time you're eating red meat, you're not eating something that has fiber. And that's something that Dr. Greger talks about a lot. Rat, do you think it's unethical though? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't really want to talk about antinatalism. I really try to focus on things that I can control. So yeah, with that, I try to be like, I'm not going to change someone's mind about having a kid. Like if they want to have a kid, they're probably going to have a kid. Maybe you could change their minds on that, but I'm not sure if it's possible. Ethan, are you a moral subjectivist or objectivist? I'm not sure. I actually don't know much about metaethics, so I should probably watch perspective philosophy as well. I tend to be a bit more practical and just kind of think about like what can I do? What actions can I take to make the world better? And by make the world better, I mean to destroy the fucking meat industry. So every day I wake up and I think, how can I help destroy the meat industry today? And that's what kind of drives me. Noble, what's up, dude? Good to see you in here. Noble is another New Orleans advocate, which there aren't that many of us. So yeah, appreciate you hopping in.
Fried chicken and all that crap, which would be associated with all of the same negative habits, likely because it doesn't have heme iron in it, is not going to have as much of a cancer signal, and in some cases won't be picked up. Obviously, I think it has other negative health effects as somebody who eats a fully plant-based diet, but still not supporting his point. And we're also getting toward the end of this, and I still have yet to see him make that argument for why red meat does not cause cancer. Say, okay, experimentally, these are the components of red meat that aren't causing cancer.
That was my other big takeaway from Merchants of Doubt when they're talking about the tobacco industry. Like they don't say specifically, oh, cigarettes don't cause cancer. They say, we don't know if cigarettes do cause cancer, which seems to be exactly what he is doing right now.
And then here is the epidemiology and everything and all the Bradford Hill criteria and stuff of why it doesn't cause cancer. He's not saying that. He's not even saying, oh, we don't really know for sure, it seems, but he's confident that it doesn't somehow.
The absence of fiber, or maybe the presence of some of the ultra processing things that go into consuming certain patterns of meat, like, gas station bought jerky and stuff like that.
But we're talking about red unprocessed meat here, still having an increased risk.
So
he's throwing gas station jerky under the bus while he's trying to sell his venison jerky all the time. I see what you're doing there. Ethan Bishop, what do you think about President Biden and will you vote for him in 2024? I don't really like him. I would like to have a president who's under, 65. Like, I don't know. I'll probably vote for him, but I don't really want to that much. Doctors in the 50s used to say cigarettes were good for you. They did. And the tobacco industry knew it wasn't true, but the doctors at that point didn't really know it wasn't true. Yeah, everyone was just smoking all the time, man. Totally crazy. It's crazy how much that's actually shifted Because if you had told someone in the 1950s, oh, in 60 years you can't smoke in restaurants, it'll be banned, they wouldn't have believed you, right? But it shows just how quickly our culture can change. And that's why I'm a bit more hopeful about animal rights, because even if it seems hopeless right now, culture does change quickly and we can all help move it along faster.
We could talk.
And he's the jerky king, bro. Come
a
on.
lot more about this, but I really think that the health effects, the ill health effects for red meat consumption is incredibly weak. The hazard ratios themselves for this are very, very small, even with all of the limitations that I've mentioned. And so, therefore, if you go back to kind of the Austin Bradford Hill criteria of epidemiology.
Oh, he's hitting the Bradford. Let's see what he says.
Which, I outline in great detail in the book. Very hard to imagine that there is causality here. In fact, the epidemiology here is so underwhelming that it almost draws the opposite conclusion, that it's almost hard to believe there is a signal given how underwhelming the epidemiology is. Whereas conversely,
yeah, I'm sad they cut onto it so fast because the meat, dairy, and egg industry took notes. Not just the meat, dairy, and egg industry, but oil and fossil fuels have really been using the guys that the tobacco industry was using. The documentary Merchants of Doubt, it's on Amazon. You do have to rent it. It was $3.99. And most of the documentary was actually about climate change and about the way that they're using these same sciences. The oil industry is using these same kind of pseudoscientists to promote this doubt about the climate crisis. And yeah, the meat industry does it as well, but I think the fossil fuels industry has really taken it and run with it even more. I remember that clip where an advocate for smoking said, "Well, some women like children with smaller heads." I saw that in a Debug Your Brain video. Yeah, so basically they're in court and someone's talking to this tobacco industry guy like, "Oh, well, we have evidence that that smoking while you're pregnant harms your children and that the babies come out smaller." And he's like, "Oh, well, some women want smaller babies." It's just absolutely the most batshit thing I've ever seen. Totally crazy. Rat, should we advocate against honey consumption or does it scare people away? Yeah, we should advocate against honey. Honey's not vegan. Bees are sentient. They are harmed by the honey industry. It's also terrible for the environment. Honey is not something I would start with when I'm talking to people about animal rights. And also apparently most vegans eat honey. I was talking to this restaurant. I was trying to see if they had vegan options and she was like super rude to me. She's like, "Oh, well, we have this appetizer. It has a tofu peanut honey sauce, but in the 5 years I've had this restaurant, no vegan has ever taken issue with it." So I really do think that most vegans eat honey. Unfortunately, I don't think we should eat it, but I don't necessarily think it should be like a priority. I think we should focus on the animals that people can kind of more easily connect with. And it's a lot harder even for me to care that much about bees, unfortunately.
Again, remember from the epidemiology of that 18-year lag, that was quite distinct in that last study, also supporting causality.
When you look at the epidemiology of smoking or the epidemiology of...
Yeah, taking the most powerful carcinogen that we're exposed to essentially is not the baseline for anything causing cancer or not.
Exercise, like those are
here he goes. Oh, so he's hitting the exercise.
That it factors into what we see as the overall causality narrative.
Now we'll get back to causality in a second, but because he mentioned the exercise, and I previously mentioned that he's like puts exercise so far ahead of diet in a previous video, that I just had to quickly mention a couple studies here. We can compare them. We have this study out of the UK looking at UK Biobank data saying that shifting your diet to a healthier one could get you 10 more years of life. And these healthy changes are things like more whole grains and less processed meat. And then we also have this study on...
Dude, that's crazy. 10 years. I don't eat that many whole grains. I just kind of eat oats plain. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't really like how do you eat whole grains? What are they? What meals do you have them in? I eat tofu scramble and then for lunch I'll have like a salad. Where do you put whole grains in that? I don't know.
Exercising looking at 13 studies for regular physical exercise, and that only bought people between 0.4 and 6.9 years of.
Oh my God, that's so low. I spend so much time exercising and I'm only going to get 0.4 to 6.9 more years. That sucks.
Increased life expectancy. So he happens to love the epidemiology for exercise, but throws it away for dietary changes. And then we also have, back to that diet study, this table, which goes ahead and shows, yeah, it is that red unprocessed meat as well that is contributing to increased all-cause mortality, because this is an all-cause mortality table, yet plant-based products across the board, unless they're refined sodas, are showing decreased mortality and decreased mortality trends. But let's go ahead and look at some Bradford Hill criteria and just really quickly get an idea. Is there no real argument here for causality? Was the WHO just clinically insane? Well, here we have biological gradient where, yeah, greater exposure generally leads to higher incidence of effect. We're seeing that across a bunch of other studies, which is, again, consistency / reproducibility. We're seeing study after study after study, increased red meat consumption, increased colorectal cancer, and now as well as other cancers. Analogy of the effect of similar factors. A similar factor would be, and for analogy, processed meat would be a similar factor here. And he seems to start conflating processed and red meat in general here. But I should also say you have heterocyclic amines in cigarettes, and that's a carcinogenic component of that. Good analogy. Then he gets to strength or effect size. He's saying that this is the weak point, but it even says right here, a small association does not mean that there is not a causal effect. Of course, a larger is better for a causal argument, especially when, for example, if there's a 10% increase in heart disease that was truly caused by something, that would still be like, 50,000 more deaths a year in the US. It's like, does it matter? Yes, it does matter, even at that.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, just when you're extrapolating with so many thousands of people, stuff like this really matters. And, this meat causing cancer stuff is confusing just because, I mean, when Mike the vegan talks about it, it seems like we really do have a lot of evidence that it's true. But then when you hear anyone else talk about it, they're just like Peter Attia. They downplay everything. And yeah, it really is that Merchants of Doubt playbook. I'm wondering what evidence it'll take for anyone to really change their minds. I don't know. It would have to be like really, really strong. Even that vegan twins study, the Netflix one, if you guys haven't seen it, definitely give it a watch. The problem that people say is that it only lasted 2 months. If they could basically do that study and have it last for like decades, like that would be so cool. I would love to see the effects of that. But that's the tough thing about nutrition, is it's really hard to do studies like this. Brown rice and quinoa. I really don't like quinoa. And yeah, when do you eat like, can you put it in salad or tofu scramble? Like, that's what I need, something that goes in that.
Small amount. Anyway, we have plausibility with mechanism. We've shown several mechanisms in experimental studies like that. Heme iron, for example, the heterocyclic amines, which is, again, experimental evidence and coherence. Yes, the lab findings match the epidemiology and temporality. As I mentioned from that study previously, we see that, yes, there's an 18-year delay between exposure to red meat and cancers. And then it's also the case in the experimental stuff where animals or whatever are exposed to heme iron, and you get that oxidation and you get that DNA damage. And then finally, we have.
All right, guys, I'm probably going to wrap up pretty soon. So if you have any questions, drop them in there now.
Specificity, another one that he's criticizing. He's saying that, it could be something else. Is there likely another explanation? And then my response to that was, hey, if you're looking at these other foods that also fit those dietary patterns, like chicken, for example, we are not seeing it, but it's, again, those ingredients that we've seen it mechanistically, experimentally showing oxidative damage to DNA. Let's let him finish up last 10 seconds. Oh, those are the last 10 seconds. Yeah, anyway, so in the end,
I wonder what it is about red meat specifically versus chicken. Like, why is red meat so much worse than chicken? Does it have to do with the fat or like the type of iron? Because they're both meat, so they're both made of animals. So yeah, I don't really know. Croco Shark, what is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is destroying the meat industry. Do aliens exist? Yes.
And it's very clear that I do not agree with this guy. And I think that this is sort of a part of a bigger pattern with him and diet here. I, again, appreciate that he's not clinically insane on diet and is like, plants are trying to kill you, like a lot of people are. Thankfully, as I've recently covered, a lot of carnivore diet people are quitting or adding plants back in to certain degrees. And I think his view, just totally favoring exercise over, dietary epidemiology, for example, is not legit. And he also didn't like debunk any experimental studies talking about heme. He didn't even mention heme iron, which is like the main topic here in terms of what is claimed to be a causal factor. And he's also literally sucking down like 6 to 10 processed meat sticks per day, of course, from the company that he invests in, which is a meat company. And again, makes you wonder how legitimate his views are here. You could say
there's a great quote from Upton St. Clair that says, "You can't make someone understand something that they're paid not to." And I think that's apt here because, yeah, like you said, the WHO compiled 800 plus studies in 2015 classifying red meat as a type 2 carcinogen. If 800 plus studies doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. And that's a great point. And the problem is that there's so much motivated reasoning here, which means that people want to keep eating animals and they want to keep profiting from animal slaughters. So with that motivation, it kind of feels like nothing's going to convince them. And that's exactly how it was with tobacco as well, because people just love smoking so much and are making so much money off of it. It wasn't till I think it was like moms who started saying, "Oh, well, we don't want our children to smoke or to grow up around smoking or be around secondhand smoke," and started trying to create legislative change. And then that's what kind of changed the culture around that, which is really interesting. Friendo, would you ever consider juggling chihuahuas? Who says that I haven't?
the same thing. I'm a vegan, and so I support various vegan products. But in this case, there's like a major carcinogen question. He's landing on a certain side of it. He's selling literally that product. So that's worth knowing. Or I should say he's investing in a product that's being sold. I still think, if in the end he gets more people to exercise, his net result is probably good. But I'm still going to say when I disagree with him on something, and I clearly do here, the research that I showed you does not match up to what he's saying. I still think there's strong Bradford Hill criteria for this. Yeah, if it was even clear cut 2 times relative risk in all situations, then that'd be nice in terms of how certain we are here. But with how many studies we have that are consistent here, I think it's a pretty strong argument. And still a 20 or 30% increased risk consistently for leading cancers. And now we're finding more cancers connected, whether it's myeloma, testicular cancer, etc., as we saw from that list. Like, this could just be the beginning. Anyway, let me know down below what you think about all this. And of course, if you would like to try Seeds DS01 Daily Sim.
Damn. Yeah. I guess there is quite a lot of evidence. All right. Yeah, brown rice under sauteed veg and tofu. That does sound good. I love curry. I make curry like all the time. All right. My mouth is watering as well. I think I'm gonna cook. I'm gonna make a tofu scramble, which I make so many tofu scrambles. It really is like probably my favorite dinner right now because of all the different veggies you can put in it. You can put mushrooms, bell peppers. Rainbow Plant Life has like the best recipe for tofu scramble. I would highly recommend it. But yeah, stream is over and it's time for dinner. Reminder, I will not be streaming next week because I will be at the Animal Vegan Advocacy Summit in DC. I'm really looking forward to it. But the week after that, we'll be back on track with Sunday Scaries. Thank you so much for everyone who came in. Thank you so much to everyone who donated. And I hope you have a great week.